Hello friends, I am Dr. Afreen Khan, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Public Administration, School of Humanities and Social Sciences at Dr. Hari Singh Gaur Vishwavidyalaya, Sagar, Madhya Pradesh, India. Today I will discuss the module on gender justice. The objective of this module is to familiarize the concept of gender justice and also explore the contemporary discourse on gender justice. While discussing the concept, I will try to understand the concept of gender as a social construction and will discuss the different form of injustice and inequalities in various sections of the society with a gender perspective. I will also analyze the various initiatives and commitments taken at the global and national level for the establishment of gender just society. Feminism has been supporting the principle of universal rights, equality, and personal freedoms from the very beginning. The universal principle of citizenship advocates a fairer and more inclusive state and society which are based on the equality, equity, and justice. Along with other disadvantaged social groups, women have demanded recognition as moral and judicial equals and have deployed egalitarian arguments to advance claim on the rights associated with citizenship. However, while they claimed that they had the same entitlements to justice and political representation as men, they also insisted that women's differences be recognized as a basis for equal treatment rather than serving to justify discriminations. Gender equality is an integral part of development. It is neither optional nor extra. In order to contribute to sustainable and equitable economic and social changes, must include a gender perspective in its methods, contents, and formats. Let's discuss the meaning and concept of gender justice. Gender equality and gender justice are basic human rights declared by the General Assembly of United Nations as Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948 and also granted by our own Constitution under Article 14, 15(1), 16 and 21. Both gender equality and gender justice are complementary to each other. In fact, gender equality is that all persons should be treated equally by the state or other authorities, irrespective of their sex, whether they are men or women. Without having gender equality, the ideals of human liberation and freedom can't be accomplished. Women's empowerment refers to women's ability to create strategic life decisions wherever that ability had been formally denied them. Every human being, either man or woman and girl, are entitled to live in dignity and in freedom without any fear or discrimination. Gender justice is essential for development, poverty reduction, and is crucial to achieving human progress. Realizing it includes sharing of power and responsibility between men and women in every sphere of life, like in home, in workplaces, and in the wider national and international communities. Gender justice refers to a world where everyone, without any biases, either men or women, boys or girls, are equally valued and are able to share equally in the distribution of power, knowledge, and resources. Now, we will look into the contemporary discourses on gender justice. Contemporary discourses on gender justice have many different starting points. Philosophical discussion of human agency, autonomy, rights and capabilities, political discussion involving democratization and citizenship, and regarding practical matter of judicial reform and access to justice in the field of legal discussion. Gender justice is generally used with regard to liberation programs that promote women's rights through legal changes and women's interest in socio-economic policy. However, the term is seldom given an accurate definition and is too often used interchangeably with the notion of gender equality, gender equity, women's empowerment, and women's rights. Conventions about women's subordination to men and the family are often rooted in assumptions about what is natural in human relationships. These ideas of women's rightful subordination are legitimized by socially and legally rooted views on propriety. It's not surprising, therefore, that concept of gender justice that seek to enhance women's autonomy or rights are controversial and provoke strong debates. Different understandings for achieving gender justice also imposing competing roles and expectations on various national and international actors. Therefore, on the one hand, the state has an implied minimal role as a guarantor of basic liberties, whereas on the other there is spaces for an interventionist role for states as well as an international system, in order to compensate for past injustices and provide concrete welfare benefits to those suffering from gender-based scarcity. Anne Marie Gause argues that the term gender justice is frequently used by activists and academicians. It offered redress for the continuing gender-based injustices from which women are suffering. She explained that although discussion of gender justice have many different starting points, but they share similar unsettled dilemmas. The philosophical consideration about human nature, rights and capabilities are linked to practical political and economic arrangements in order to establish entitlements that are attached to citizenship and to the problem of obvious discrimination or hidden biases in the law and legal practice. Gause defines gender justice as the ending of and the provision of redress for inequalities that resulted in women's subordination to men. Seeing gender justice as an outcome and as the process helps differentiate between what is to be achieved and how it is to be achieved. Gender justice as a desirable goal implies access to and control over resources shared with the agency and the ability to make choices. As a long-lasting practice, gender justice brings in additional essential elements, that is accountability, which implies the responsibility and answerability of precisely those social institutions set up to bestow justice. The formation of gender injustices may be observed from basic contracts, formal or implicit, that form membership in a variety of social institutions like the family, the community, the market, the state, and even the religious institutions. Understanding the ideological and cultural justification for women's subordination within each arena can help identify how to challenge the patterns of inequality. Before analyzing gender inequalities, let's quickly take a look on the term of gender as a social construct concept. Because of feminism and feminist theory, gender is being recognized as an important social factor. Indeed, the new meaning of the word reflects the fact that so much of what has traditionally been thought of as sexual difference is now considered by many to be largely socially produced. We must remember that the terms sex and gender are neither synonymous nor interchangeable. Sex as a universal term is a biological concept. At birth, a person's physical, biological and bodily characteristics determine his or her sex as female or male. With the exception of in cases of transsexuality, this sex is irreversible. On the other hand, gender is a sociological concept which is ever changing. It does not only stand for women, men are also included when we say gender. Gender expresses the social relations between men and women, which are based on culturally acquired values and norms associated with femininity and masculinity. These relations vary frequently from one time and place to another. We don't have the same approach as our grandparents did. Likewise, an Indian woman or man doesn't behave in the same way as a French woman or man. Principles, values, beliefs and behaviors evolve and are rooted in a specific context. Worldwide, social relations between men and women are characterized by inequalities that disadvantage women. In all spheres of life, men are always in a dominant position, either in power or decision making or access to and control over resources. Nonetheless, social structure and productive human work are underpinned by and totally dependent on the domestic work was done by women, which remain unseen. Gender relations are the ultimate social construct. As codified and asymmetrical terms, they are not set in stone, hence can be modified to create larger equality. In its applicability, the term gender is associated with notion of equality and equity, which are complementary but not interchangeable. Let's see what is meant by equality. Equality is related to law, indicates that all human beings are free to develop their skills and make choices without the limitation of stereotypes, prejudices and rigid gender roles. The rights and responsibilities and opportunities of women and men cannot depend on whether they were born male or female. Gender equality implies that women and men have equal rights and their desires and requirements are regarded as equally. So what is equity? Equity is more related to justice. Equity means fair treatments for women and men. This treatment could also be identical or completely different, however, ought to be equivalent in terms of rights, benefits, obligations and opportunities. Equity requires specific measures to compensate for the existing imbalances that disadvantage women. The ultimate goal is equality. However, being equal doesn't mean being the similar. In a population made up of many different individuals, homogeneity is neither possible nor desirable. Heterogeneity, that is multiplicity and diversity, wins out. Every person has his or her own identity that formed by socio-economic factors such as sex, age, peer group, social and geographical background, religion, social, marital and family status, health, education and professional position. These identity creates different needs and expectations, specific hopes and aspirations and particular constraints and strengths. Discrimination and inequality is a characteristic of most of the societies in the world. In the comparison of women, men have on average better position in socio-economic and political hierarchy. Women have few rights and resources and limited opportunity to improve their lives. They are restricted in terms of education, ownership of property, monetary return for their work, financial opportunities, and chances to influence decision making at the level of the family and society. The dearth of resources and opportunities open to women is strongly related to society-wide poverty or lack of development. The United Nations Development Programs, that is called UNDP, Human Development Index, that is HDI 2018 has shows that gender inequality remains at the utmost obstruction to the human development. Human development gaps reflect unequal opportunity in access to education, health, employment, credit and natural resources due to gender, group identity, income disparities and location. The average HDI for women is 6% lower than that of men, with countries in the low development category suffering the widest gap. However, inequality exists worldwide. The figure shows it. Women carry out of 2/3 of the world's working hours and produce over 50% of its food, but only 10% earning of its income, owes less than 2% of its property and receive less than 5% of all bank loans. In 1.2 billion people are living in poverty. Among them, 70% are women. If we see in last 20 years, the number of rural women living in absolute poverty has increased by 50% compared with 30% for men. No country has achieved wage equality. 60% of workers in uncertain jobs are women. Around 16% of the illiterate adults population, 2/3 are women. 72 million school-age children are not in school, among them 54% are girls. World has 40 million refugees and 75% of them are women and children. 1 out of 3 women has been raped, beaten or suffered some form of violence at least once in her lifetime. We can see the worldwide picture of gender inequality through the images shown. These are the images from Gender Inequality Index by Developing Region in 2017 and the HDI Index, Gender Gap Index. We can see that in GII and Gender Gap Index, the South Asian region is in slightly low position. The most general reasons for gender inequality rooted in the patriarchy and arise mainly due to the differences in socially constructed roles in genders. This distinction between men and women is generally regarded to political, social, economic or any other problem that is perceived to exist as a result of such differences. Tradition, culture, patriarchal mentality, religion, level of education, non-accessibility to resources and the low level of participation in decision making, etc. are the main causes of gender inequality. India is not an exception in this regard. Gender disparity and equality is one of the strong phenomena of Indian society. Gender disparity is also reflected in India's poor ranking in varied global gender indices. India is ranked 130th in the Gender Development Index 2018 out of 189 countries, while in 2017 its rank is 127. Let's see some pictures. The first table is shows India's HDI trends based on consistent time series data and new goalpost. In the figure shown, the contribution of each component indexed to India's HDI since 1919 to 2017. We can see that India's performance in these HDI values is positive, but there is still a long way to achieve gender just society. Let's see India's GII for 2017 relative to selected countries and group, and also India's ranking in Global Gender Gap Report in 2017. Though in comparison of its neighboring countries like Pakistan, Bangladesh, India's performance in GII, GGR and HDI is better, still it is not up to the mark. For more than 2 decades, the goal of reducing gender inequalities has controlled a distinguished place in international organizations and in national strategy statements. Millennium Development Goal, that is called MDG, reflected the global attention to the issues of gender inequality, provided the impetus for governments to work toward the elimination of gender inequality by 2005 in primary and secondary education, and all levels by 2015. Though MDGs were not fully achieved, its target, we can see the positive result in various fields like poverty and hunger reduction, increasing of literacy rate, achieving gender disparity at least in primary education in developing countries. In 2015-16, the international community additionally agreed on the 17th Sustainable Development Goal, that is called SDGs or Agenda 2030, with Goal 5 clearly requesting gender equality and Goal 8 demanding full and productive employment for women and men alike, as well as equal pay for equal work by the year 2030. Addressing gender inequality and the demand for gender justice is not a recent phenomenon. The United Nations was working towards elevating gender equality and women's empowerment since its establishment. In 1946, a commission was set up on the status of women for the protection of women's human rights at the global level. To increase awareness and commitment of gender equality and gender justice, 1976 to 1985 was declared as Women's Decade. 4 World Women Conferences between 1975 and 1995 made important contributions in the field of gender justice. The decade of 1990 was a time of hope and achievement for feminist academics and for international women's movement, which brought the idea of social justice and equality as international policy agenda. The international UN conferences opened the doors of debates and discussion on the issues of environment, human rights, population and women empowerment, and gender justice. The establishment of gender mainstreaming as a critical strategy in the platform for action was an important breakthrough, as it required attention to gender equality and the empowerment of women in all sectors. It's essential for government to pay attention toward gender perspectives in every sphere. The Constitution of India conveys a powerful mandate for equality, justice and rights of women in its preamble, fundamental rights and duties, and also provides specific provisions for affirmative actions. We can see these affirmative action in box 1. The state also enacted several women specific and women related legislation to protect women against social discrimination, violence and atrocities, and also to prevent social evils like child marriages, dowry, rape, violence, the practice of sati, etc. We can see these things in box 2. Many new schemes and programs targeted specific groups at addressing specific issues. Some of them are Sabla for empowering adolescent girls, IJMSY for supporting poor pregnant women, Mahila Kisan Sashakti-karan Yojana for women farmers, a scheme for leadership training for minority women that is called Nai Roshni, Ujjwala for combating trafficking, Beti Bachao Beti Padhao scheme for girls literacy, and Dhan Lakshmi to tackle the issue of declining sex ratio. Several other policy choices were shaped for women and children, the result of which is able to be visible in the time to come. Most important among these was the initiation of the National Mission for Empowerment of Women, that is called NMEW, on March 8, 2010. This mission worked for strengthening intersectoral convergence at the central, state, district and lower levels of governance, making it possible for women to know about and access all government schemes and programs. Another landmark decision on which work has been initiated is the restructuring of the Rashtriya Mahila Kosh into a systematically important non-banking finance company. Gender budgeting was introduced in 2007 with a view to building capacity in order that a gender perspective was maintained at all levels of the planning, budget formulation and implementation process. Gender budgeting initiatives are also led to the development of new schemes in supposedly gender neutral sectors like Department of Telecommunication and the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. Inclusion and mainstreaming of women also established special attention under programs such as the Manrega, the Rights to Free and Compulsory Education, National Rural Health Mission, National Rural Livelihood Mission, and National Skill Development Mission. India witnessed the world's largest experiment in local democracy, triggered by the 73rd and 74th Amendments to the Constitution. The reservation of 1/3 seats for women has resulted in more than 1 million elected women leaders in decision-making position at grassroots levels. With the reservation already increased to 50% in several states like Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, Rajasthan, and a constitutional amendment to this effect in the process. The panchayats can have great potential for women's empowerment and their contribution to gender-sensitive good governance. Panchayats play an important role in providing efficient services at local level. It would therefore be the endeavor to equip elected women representatives to play this role and work for gender-sensitive good governance in their panchayats by ensuring gender-specific interventions. The capacity of elective women representatives would also be developed to work towards the elimination of violence against women and girls, including trafficking and universal education for girls. We can conclude that despite the great progress made in the arena of women's rights in theory and policy formulation, women are still facing violation of their socio-political and economic rights in the family and the community. Women's rights, equality, equity, and justice must be looked with renewed vigor and vision. It should be an integral part of the development and welfare policies of states and national organizations. However, the tenacious anti-feminist norms and values that still prevail in India are hardly something that can be quickly dissolved or transformed. Nonetheless, it is safe to assume that economic development and better education for women and, to an explicit extent, increased formal employment opportunities for women along with corresponding incomes would contribute to a change in values. A greater supply of jobs for women and the expansion of state-funded education for women can increase the economic participation of women that would facilitate the positive transformation of gender relations and help to achieve the gender-just society.